Elite Physique University, your source for all things physique enhancement.
Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to Elite Physique University. I'm John Gorman, your host. We've got Scooby Snacks himself, Jason Theobald, in the house. What's up, man? How are you?
Well, I'm good. What's going on?
Oh, not a lot. It's as we sit down and record this, it's January 30th, and this is one of the episodes, man, that you and I, we've talked about a lot of this before in the past for years, really, and it's January 30th, so this is the perfect time to kind of drop this episode. We're going to talk about natural versus enhanced diets, natural versus enhanced preps, and you know, January just seems to be synonymous with dieting, not just in the fitness world. But in bodybuilding too, like a lot of people are finishing up their off season. They're getting ready to start prep for spring and maybe summer shows if they've got longer preps. How busy are you over there with people that started their prep in January? Is it a pretty busy time for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's a real busy time. I mean, you know, I have a lot of my people stay with me year round these days, which is cool. And so, you know, I knew what was coming, like, you know, but I still have some people that aren't starting till like March because I have a lot of people doing like looking at pro cards, going to like Masters Nationals or North Americans, things like that. So some of those haven't kicked off, but yeah, like, you know, January, February is always a big starting point. And I plan for that, you know, get them kind of primed for that prep. So I always kind of know what's coming on my schedule and when it's going to be busy, and definitely January, February are big jump off starting points.
Yeah, you know, it's most of my clients are in the natural world. So, I mean, I'm seeing a lot of people finish up the holidays. I'm trying to get them through Christmas and New Year's and trying to keep fat gain to a minimum. That way we can start prep fresh sometime in January. And a lot of my clients are doing, you know, 20-week preps. And we'll talk about why I kind of choose to do things that way. So January is pretty busy. I've got, you know, probably a dozen people in prep already, and that'll pick up to probably 30 or 40. You know, half my clients are Gen Pop or lifestyle, but the other half are bodybuilders. So, I mean, I'll have quite a few people starting prep, and then people with fall shows, you know, they'll start in the summer. So it's definitely a busy time. So before we get into the nuts and bolts of this, couple real quick housekeeping things. I do want to find out what's new with you this week. I think we've got something interesting to talk about that we discussed before we started the show. And I also want to give a shout out to our listeners because, dude, like we were kind of blown away when we talked on the phone earlier. And we're up to like 110 reviews. And I swear to God, like 5 days ago, it was at 88.
It's crazy.
They're all 5 stars. Like, I know we're going to get that 1 star in there. We're going to get that dickhead in there that's like,
oh, yeah,
hey, your audio sucks. And they don't realize, like, dude, we're using Zoom. Like, there's like, we're diet coaches. Like, we're not, you know, audio professionals. So like, we'll get those people in there and that's fine. But a shout out to our listeners because you guys have been crushing it. I know you guys are recommending us. It's all word of mouth. Without you, like, this thing isn't taking off, and this is only episode 8 and we're already at 110 reviews. Like, man, this is good. So thank you to the listeners.
Definitely.
And you know what, man, it may be the magic approach I took last episode. I said, hey, listen, if you're somewhere right now, you can pause it, click on the stars, leave us a review, unpause it, and get back to listening. It only takes a second. Just use voice to text and say, hey, you know, I love this podcast, or whatever you want to leave. Like, that stuff really helps us. Yep. So if you did just pause that and you're getting back, welcome back to the show. That's what I said last time. And I said, listen, if you just blew past that and you didn't, a fucking kitten died somewhere. So you're responsible for that. It's not on us. So all jokes aside, Jason, why don't you tell everybody what you've been doing different this week? Because I think it's the perfect kind of way to kick this episode off, because it is dieting season. What more important thing to talk about than what you're seeing right now?
Right. So I don't know how many of our listeners follow me on Instagram or not, but I've posted, you know, at times how my experience is going with Whoop App. And for those of you that don't know what Whoop App is, it basically is this little band that you wear all day and night through, and it's like a little Apple Watch or something. It's no big deal, but it's on your wrist. And it tracks your HRV, which is your heart rate variability. And, you know, heart rate variability, it's a whole show in its own. But to give you just a quick synopsis, basically, it's the timed beats, like, or the time between the beats of your heart. And none of them are like, everyone thinks probably they're like the same interval length, but they're not. They vary. You know, one beat might be 1.2, then the next might be 1.4 seconds, etc. And the app tracks it. And this shows basically how stressed you are and how easily you move from parasympathetic to sympathetic, back to parasympathetic. And the better you move and the better way your body can do that, the less stress you basically hold and the healthier you are. So I have this app, and it also tracks sleep, which is really cool. And inside of tracking sleep, it's got a sleep coach, which is really cool. So like if you click that you want to perform the next day and not just get by, it'll say, all right, based on all your numbers, you need to get to bed at 9:45 and wake up at 7 a.m. You'll get what you need. And so it tells you like what you need to do. But my thing is, I'm kind of a night owl, and it's not because I feel like I have messed up cortisol or anything. I just, once everyone goes to bed, I like me time to kind of sit. Sometimes I read, sometimes I watch just mindless shit on Netflix, and it just kind of helps me cap off my day, and kind of, that's how I recharge my battery. So anyways, I stay up late a little bit, and so I don't always get the amount of sleep that they're saying. So I'm looking at this app, and what it does, it also tracks your deep sleep and your light sleep and your REM sleep. And for those of you who don't know much about any of those phases of sleep, the deep sleep is where your body recovers, okay? So that's like the deepest level of sleep, and that's where a lot of the body recovery is going on. REM is where your brain is most active and most of dreaming is going on. So if you want to think of it this way, REM is like brain repair, and deep is like body repair, okay? And if you get online and just do some reading about it, most average adults are doing well if they get about an hour of deep sleep per 8 hours of being in bed. Well, I never really usually get 8 hours. So I was looking at ways that I could at least improve the amount of deep sleep I get and the amount of REM sleep I get. And I've been doing just different experiments, and I've been getting damn near close to 2 hours of deep. And then one day I got like 2 hours and 8 minutes. So let's just round 2 hours and 10. And that night I was doing 2 Cortis, 2 full relax droppers from New Ethics, and 5 mgs of melatonin. And I also think it had like an hour of 50 minutes of REM. So like I was just crushing it. And I only slept it set in bed like 6.5 hours. So my ratios were amazing. And so, you know, this is a way to, you know, improve your performance without maybe getting as much time in bed as you need. And so I've just kind of been playing around with these things in recovery. And, you know, it's really cool to be able to kind of match your recovery up with, you know, how much intensity you can apply that day to not kind of take your body beyond its recovery needs. So you don't really need deloads. You can kind of always kind of walk right up to that strain area, but never go above it. So it's been really interesting. And that was what I had posted about. And you had mentioned that maybe we should talk about it tonight. So
yeah, man,
that's it in a nutshell.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty fascinating. Like you said, we'll have a whole episode on HRV, the importance of sleep and how it's all kind of connected. Those might be a couple different episodes. But it's really, really fascinating because I think what a lot of people don't realize is they focus on getting more sleep. That seems to be the default. But if there's a way, such as what you're saying now, is to just maximize your deep sleep. Most people don't want to get 9 hours of sleep a night. Like I don't want to spend more time sleeping.
It's just hard, right? Yeah. Like, I mean, our lives. And like I said, I could literally go to bed at 10:30. I could, but that's when the family goes to bed. And I like my alone time a little bit. Like I do. Right. So yeah.
Yeah. So two full droppers of relaxed liposomal, hold it under your tongue. I always tell my clients for a couple minutes, hold it under there, take a drink of water, swallow. Chase that with 2 Cortis, and then you said 5 mgs of melatonin.
And that was like the magic potion for me. And, you know, 10 mgs might be needed for people. And there is a little melatonin in the liposomal. And so, you know, they might get a great reward just from Cortis and the relax. I was just playing around with different formulas. And that's when I finally got into the 2+ hours, and I wasn't even getting 8 hours in bed. So I was like, damn, that's pretty sweet. And so then, you know, I posted what I had been doing.
Well, I've already adopted that protocol minus the melatonin for
Yep.
my clients during prep when they're starting to
Yep.
stall out. So that's probably going to be kind of a go-to there. I might have them add just a little bit. They've been doing one
Yep.
quarties. I might have them hit two. So that's something good. I just picked up something new. So excellent. Let's go ahead and jump on to
Yeah.
our episode. So this is an important episode because we'll both kind of represent, I'll represent the natural bodybuilding world and natural bodybuilding coaches. You can do the assisted side. We can both talk about both, obviously, but I think that's kind of the cool thing with the show is we'll be able to give two perspectives and talk about it in that sense. Man, we see a lot of different approaches to prep. We see a lot of 12-week cookie cutter preps where that's what we all used to think. Hey, 12-week prep, you're going to start this, this, and this. Here's your gear. Here's your cycle. Like there's a lot of people that learn that way. And if you had 40 fucking pounds to lose, it didn't matter. You got 12 weeks. It's just going to hurt. Or you see a lot of these long drawn out preps, like 20, 25 weeks or
Yeah.
even more than that, where and you see that a lot in the natural bodybuilding world. That's just kind of become popular. Most people don't know how to set their prep up. So to get to where we're about to go, I like to go back. I like to talk about what we've learned from what we've done. And that kind of sets the listeners up to understand, like, listen, we've been here, here, and here, and this has brought us to where we are now with our clients and why our clients have such high rates of success. It's all tied back to what we learned from. So Jason, back in the day when you would prep, did you always do like a standard, hey, I'm 12 weeks out, I'm going to go ahead and cut into the show? Have you ever tried longer
Yeah.
preps? Kind of what did you start from? And then what did you kind of adopt as a coach when you first started?
Yeah. So, I mean, when I first got into competing around my area, Beverly International, if anyone knows, that supplement company was kind of like the big deal in the area. And they actually had diet coaches that they paid, and you could go see them. And they're in Cold Spring, Kentucky, which is really close to me. And that part was free, but of course you would walk away buying, a couple $300-$400 of Beverly supplements. But their thing and everything around here was pretty much you diet 12 weeks, and I was fresh and new, and I didn't even think about, well, really, it kind of depends on how much body fat I have and this and that, but you just didn't really know all that back then. Like you just thought, well, everyone does 12 weeks and that's when they want to see me. So that's what I'm going to do, and you just busted your ass to get as good as you could in 12 weeks. And that was about it. As I got into it more and wanted to do better and realized that I was that competitor whose abs came in easy, low back was always fine, but my legs are always kind of, lagging behind in terms of a shredded condition. Same for glutes and hammies. I adopted a 16 weeks out, as I got online at RX Muscle and talked to different people. And then eventually, when that still wasn't really working for my glutes and hams, I did do a couple 20-week preps. And I learned that was miserable for me and my family and my life. And I hated every minute of it. And so I just started staying leaner over time. And finally got to the point where, 8 weeks was pretty sweet for me. And so I would rather stay lean and not become a fat ass in the off season, so I don't have to truly diet as long. So it's kind of evolved for me over time.
Did you start to, when you first started, did you just kind of adapt to what worked for you with your clients early on? Did you automatically start taking some of your natty folks, just 20, 25-week preps, or did you kind of stick to that 12 to 16-week prep?
By the time I started coaching, I was generally doing 16-week preps. But by then, I would have a few people that just couldn't get it done. And so then, my mind started expanding and opening up to the fact that there are people who just need more time. So, I know early on I started having some females having to do 20 weeks. My wife, I had recommended do 20 weeks. And, this was going back to like 2009, I think, one of her preps. So, I got there pretty quickly that, hey, this is a very individual thing. And, if someone's natural, they're going to need more time. It's just how it is.
Right. So I'll kind of kick off mine and talk about when I first started. I really started dieting for shows back in 2000. I started my first real dieting like a bodybuilder in 2007, but it wasn't for a show. 2008, I tried to prep for my first show and I didn't make it. Mark Rosemany was helping me. I
Yep.
remember back from the muscular development days, and I was 205 pounds to start, natural, and I had never been on stage. So when you looked at me and I lost 20 pounds, I still had a lot of fat to go. I'm one
Yep.
of those people. Like, I don't change a lot until I get down to the last 15 pounds. Then you really start seeing some big change. So my physique was deceptive, and we dieted like 25 weeks, and we got around 25, 30 pounds off. And I learned a lot about that. And I thought, okay, I'm working with this guy that's really good at helping people dial in, but he was also a carb-based guy. And that's not a knock on
Yes.
him. He just didn't know
Nope.
me. I didn't know
Nope.
me. And,
You
I'm
didn't either.
dieting
Yeah.
on high carbs, lower fat, just
Right.
2 hours of cardio a day. Just wasn't working well. So it was kind of an eye-opener to me. So I went off season, scrapped 2008. And 2009, you and I worked together for the first
Yep.
time. And I remember I was like, dude, I think I'm going to need a long time to prep. Like, I want to start. I think I started like right after Thanksgiving. I'm like, listen, man, I'm ready. Like, you know how it is when you're ready
Yep.
and you're a new coach. You're like, fuck it, let's go. And,
Right.
dude, I dieted from like Thanksgiving until May is how long it took me. I went from 205 down to 155.
Yeah.
So that was an eye opener for me. And dude, I don't know how much my prep was kind of an eye opener for you, but I was natural, and it took me so long to get down there. And I did not cheat on the diet. Like in 2009, I did not mess around. 2010, I had some issues, but I didn't. And it just took me that long to get down there. So it kind of wrapped my head around, at least what I was learning from myself. And then I started to adapt that approach for some of
Mm-hmm.
my clients. Now, I did start working with people in 2010, and I tried the 12-week preps for people, the 16-week preps, and I didn't really understand how to kind of set up prep length. And that's kind of what we're going to get into next, what we recommend now. So I'll throw it back over to you. When you have someone get a hold of you and you check out all their stats, all their information, you make sure they're in a good place, maybe you're looking at blood work, and you're ready to try and figure out prep length, what's a couple things that you're looking at to say, hey, we need a 16-week prep, we need 12, we need 20? Like, what's
Right.
the main things that you're looking at with that person?
Right. So I usually ask, if okay, so if I'm just looking right away and I'm just analyzing someone, say like they're just deciding still if they're gonna, work with me. I'll ask for pictures, and of course I'm gonna look at a lot of the trouble areas. I'm gonna look at glutes, I'm gonna look at hamstrings, I'm gonna look at low back, lower stomach as well. And generally speaking, I'm going to come to a point in my head pretty quickly and say, this person has 30, this person has 25, this person has 20. And then I'm going to start doing the math. Like, okay, well, if this person's natural, I really don't want more than 1.2 per week. So then I start doing the math. If this person's not natural, and I can probably expand that to, 1.5, 2 per week and not lose muscle. And so I do the math. So, those are the things I look at. But then if I'm still not sure, I'll say, hey, let me see your last stage pics. It's only been 8 months. You haven't gained that much lean tissue. Let me see your old stage pics. Let me see the kind of condition you got in and what did you weigh? And if they were freaking rip roaring peeled, then maybe I'll add 3 pounds to it and say, all right, it gives me a better idea. If they weren't, then I might say, all right, you still had 10 pounds to go. Let me run the numbers. So you can look at old stage pics too to get an idea if right away your eye isn't giving it to you. But I've been doing this so long that I can generally look at a physique and look at those trouble areas and be like, yeah, you're around 30 pounds. And then it just depends, like, are we enhanced? Are we natural? How long is this going to truly take? And then I like to give them an idea so that they know what they're jumping into,
So whenever somebody comes to you, we'll jump over the enhanced side, right? And then I'll tackle my approach on the natural. If you've got a guy that needs to lose 25, are you good with a 12-week prep and you're going to push for 2 pounds a
No.
week, or do you recommend 1 to 1.5 and giving yourself a little bit of time?
At that point, I'm going to say, 16 I would rather have, and scale it back to, 1.5, somewhere around there, and be ready early. I don't ever want to, for all of our listeners, you never want to basically do your time calculations and you can't lose a week. So you always want to build in a few weeks where maybe you stall and don't have any progress at all. just saying, all right, we got to do 2 every week and hoping to hell you hit it. That's too much stress on them and yourself. I don't ever put myself under that type of bullshit. I mean, not ever. I mean, I take people at 8 weeks out and sometimes they need, to really haul ass. But like, I just posted a guy that I took at 8 weeks out this today, but I had worked with him before. So I knew that like I could push him and I knew what his body was capable of, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, I'm generally going to build in some time for stall out, even with enhanced, because enhanced helps you hold more muscle and things like that. But it's still hard as fuck to get in shape and prep. I mean, it does a lot, and we'll get into more of those. But yeah, I like to build in weeks. I don't like to be right up on the deadline.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. So, whenever I have natural clients come to me, I do all the same things you do. I look at their last pictures, if they've competed before. If not, I just have to go with my mind's eye.
Yep.
And I have to get a good educated guess. And guys and gals listening that are coaches, that just takes time. It really does. Like, you can get body fat tested and you can aim for 5 to 10 pounds over that. But if you're natural, your muscle mass is going to drop too towards the end, which we'll talk a little bit about that. So you have to factor that in. A lot of the times with natural clients, if you don't know what their stage weight's going to be and you're a coach, or that's you as the athlete, sometimes you just have to just get lean and try and lose a pound per week. That's what I like to recommend. There's a lot of research out there on this, by the way, in natural individuals. Losing a pound a week, you're going to lose less muscle during the duration of the diet versus losing 2 pounds a week, for example. And that was something I really learned the hard way with my clients early on. I used to push for 2 pounds a week with natural folks. And man, that last 10 to 15 pounds, when they got lean, that's when muscle loss really happens. So I was really just eating a lot of muscle off their frame. So I like to tell people, listen, we're going to diet 1 pound a week off of you. I am going to bake in 2 to 3 weeks for things like stalls, or when people mess up on the plan, because let's face it, they may not report it to you, but it's pretty common, I've noticed, for people to fall off the plan, or for people to eat stuff that they like. If you have somebody eating a real strict these specific foods, it's pretty common for people to go off, and they'll go off and eat things that you don't want them to eat, or they'll eat out and not tell you. So I try and bake in a few extra weeks for that. So if somebody has 25 pounds to lose, I always tell them, I'm like, listen, we're going to start dieting about 25, 30 weeks out, nice and slow. We're going to get you into a groove. And then we're going to be open to not picking a very specific show, because I've never dieted you before. You've never been on stage. We just need to get you lean and shredded. And in natural bodybuilding, dude, there's so many fucking shows. Like, it's a good and a bad thing. There's so many shows. I just tell them, like, listen, let's get lean. About 4 to 6 weeks out, I'm going to know. You're going to kick it up another notch because you're going to be even more motivated. And then let's find shows 6 weeks out. So that, to me, is kind of a safe approach that I take, unless I know someone's prior stage weight and they've done this before and they're not a newbie. Then I can pick shows. Then I know, listen, if they've got 20 pounds to lose, I'm going to start them 25 weeks out. And my goal with natural folks is to have them ready early if I can. I like to have people ready in a perfect scenario. It doesn't happen all the time. I like to have them ready 3 to 4 weeks early if possible, or I like to have them really close with only a couple pounds to lose, and I like to pull the steady state out, and I like to slowly feed them carbs. I call it 10 carbing them to death. I'll add 10 carbs a week, and I let their metabolism help speed up and let some fat loss happen, the stubborn fat loss, and dropping cortisol helps spare a little bit of testosterone. It tightens you up. There's a lot of good things that can happen that last week. And I like to try and get people ready early so they can look better headed into their shows. So for me, I elect a longer prep. Now, I'm also big on flexible dieting if someone wants to do that. And while I think if someone just ate 100% clean for their prep, they would get lean easier, because it's a hell of a lot easier to track those food. They're easier on digestion. It's more accurate. If someone would do that, that's fine. But if you have to prep 25 fucking weeks, I'm going to let them be pretty flexible. And that, to me, is another reason why I allow them to eat some of the foods, because we have some time. We're only aiming for a pound fat loss a week. So, man, I talked for a long time, but that kind of gives people my general recommendations. Obviously, it's going to be different depending on each client that comes on board.
For sure.
With me.
It's so individual in this. I mean, everyone has a different fat loss pace that they can keep up and that they can handle. And, I still a lot of naturals. And honestly, when they come to me and I know that they're going to want to do a show prep in the next 6, 7, 8 months, most of them come to me too fat. I don't like their body fat usually. So I diet a lot of people first before I ever go into a lean gain phase. And then I set them up so that they're not gaining any more fat, so that can shorten their diet time as a natural. Cause I have a really hard time putting someone and telling them to diet 25 weeks. I just do, because I'm not sure I mentally can do it anymore. So I like to just go ahead and get them leaner first. It sets up the gain phase much better anyways. And then I can shorten their prep time. That's me. Not everyone has to do that. That's just generally my steps.
Yeah. So do you like to have clients, and I guess this really depends on the client, but do you like the idea of just dieting and picking a show as you get closer? Or do you like the idea of, hey, here's a show, let's aim for that one? What's your approach there? Are you open-minded to either way?
Well, if I have my pick, I think that a lot of people do better just starting to diet, know that there's going to be a show coming up. And then as we start to look better, we can pick it. I feel like without that stress, people's bodies respond better. That said, some people come to you and they're like, look, I feel like I had a good off season. I want to do Masters Nationals. I've got 20 weeks before it. Are you willing to prep me? And it's, if you want the client and you think that they've given enough sufficient time, then I'm not going to tell them they have to change shows and take my approach of, not really picking something and just kind of waiting. So sometimes it really depends on the client. But if someone has no time frame in terms of getting on stage, then yeah, a lot of times I'll be like, look, let's go ahead and do a diet here. We'll have a diet break. We'll get the calories up. Then we can go ahead and start looking at shows once we get back into the dieting phase and kind of pick some things. And a lot of people are like, hey, that's cool. But like I said, if they already are like dead set on a show and I do the math in my head and I think they can make it, I'll let them, I'm going to keep that date. I'm going to work with what they want. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I just, like you said, it's such a lower stress prep, which becomes very, very important. I have a lot of people that they want to pick a show. And then whenever I do go ahead and go with that, they feel behind the whole fucking time. And then I start feeling that way as a coach. And I think it's better for coach and client. I do want to talk about muscle loss and when that really happens during a prep, natural versus enhanced. With natural athletes, here's the thing, guys, and this natural or enhanced, by the way, the more body fat you have on you, like at the end of off season, like my fat ass sitting here right now, like I've got a good 15% on me. When I diet the next 10 pounds off myself, I'm not going to lose any muscle because when you've got fat on you like that, it spares muscle. Like it's when natural people especially, start to get really, really lean, you have lower body fat levels and your testosterone drops a lot more when you get really, really lean. That's when muscle loss really happens. So a lot of my natural folks are like, man, you dropped my calories 500 and you started me on cardio like 5 days a week right out of the gate. I'm worried about losing muscle. And I'm like, no, you're a little bit fat to start. So like I'm going to push hard because I've got a cushion. You've got fat. Like we're not going to drop any muscle like that. So, Jason, whenever people talk to you about muscle loss with your enhanced folks, when do you see muscle loss happen the most during an enhanced prep?
Okay. So here's the deal with enhanced. It's like prepping with a safety blanket. You can skip refeeds. You can hit cardio harder. Cortisol is not going to build up as much because testosterone's higher and testosterone helps blunt it. But if I see muscle loss, most of the time it's more with men and it's going to be the last 4 weeks. Trying to get glutes in or trying to get hams when they've got really stubborn fucking body parts, or maybe they've just never been tore down yet. You know how it is? Like once someone finally gets just all the fat off their body, if they bodybuild right, they never really should get back to being as big of a fat ass as they were in their previous life. And therefore each time it gets a little easier to strip that off. Well, that's when they're going to save muscle. But that first time trying to get all that body fat off, even on supplements, that last 4 weeks is when it's going to happen, which is kind of common for a natural too, if they're doing it right and they didn't rush it. But a natural obviously can lose it from day one if the diet's not set up right. You don't really see that with an enhanced. I mean, the safety blanket's there, but I mean, if you really got to push for a part, I'd say the last 4 weeks is when it can happen. And I see it more in men than women. Women, in general, I've always kind of felt this way that you can push women harder generally, and they won't lose muscle as easily as men. I think it's because it's harder to come by for women, and the muscle they do have is more solidified. I don't know if anyone's ever proven that in science, or it's just kind of one of those things that I see. But then you add, Anavar to an enhanced woman. I just don't really see a ton of muscle loss in them, but I have seen it happen in men when we're trying to push for certain body parts. So that's kind of been my experience with it.
Man, I love you for that comment earlier. I know the listeners do too. When you talk about getting back to being a fat ass, like you just call it like you see it. I'm sitting over here fucking chuckling, man. I wish we had the video on while we're recording. She'd see me just laughing my ass off. But dude, I mean, listen, it is what it is. I mean, I just call myself a fat ass, so it's all it's all good. So the other thing with muscle loss, with women, I see it more obviously in guys, because they have to get down. I mean, you get a natural guy down to 4 or 5% body fat. Like that's when it's going to happen. Natural female bodybuilders, which are very rare these days, I see it happen with them. My theory with why women don't lose as much towards the end, when you look at their DEXAs and stuff like that, is because, I might get a figure competitor down to, in some of these natural organizations down to 10% or 12%. And they look good enough to win. But if I had to keep pushing them down to like natural bodybuilding, pro level body fat, then they're going to lose it. So that's kind of my theory on, bikini competitors. I don't think are going to lose much unless they're just getting too fucking lean. And, in the natural world, that's not really the case. So I don't know. It's definitely interesting. I want to come back to muscle loss, but also muscle gain. But first, let's talk about cardio versus food drops, and natural versus enhanced athletes. And I'll throw this over to you. Are you a fan of, if you can pick, if you're the one setting up the off season, you're the one controlling the prep in the beginning, and all the way through, are you a fan of using more cardio and keeping food higher? Are you a fan of dropping food? And like, which would you pick if you had to? What's better? And an enhanced individual.
Yep. So, I mean, I can speak from experience for right now. Like, I have had 3 men start their diets, more, but I've had 3 men like recently start their diets, and none of them I didn't have them on off-season cardio, and I didn't put them on off-season cardio to start. Their calories were so damn high that I knew if I made a diet adjustment, there was no way in hell that they were going to be in a spot where they'd have to risk muscle loss. But I also knew that their body would respond right away. So why add cardio? As the diet progresses, I'm actually one of those coaches that if I can just manipulate cardio a little bit and it doesn't look like it's to the point where it's a burden on the body and their recovery, I'm going to leave food a little higher and usually make more changes with cardio. If someone is stalled out for, let's say, 10 days, I'm going to move food, and I might have to move cardio too. But, if someone's getting there and maybe I just want to make sure they stay moving, it's been maybe 10 days since I've done anything, I'm generally going to go ahead and adjust cardio and let that food stay higher. That's me. There's some coaches I know that like try not to use cardio at all till like, maybe someone's 8 weeks out and they just keep pulling food. I really like to preserve the training intensity. And so I feel like you need food for that, so that's kind of how I do it.
Yeah. So, that's the interesting thing, man. It's just how we all do things and like what we've seen work. With me, I don't think I've had but maybe 4 or 5 clients over an hour of cardio a day to get stage lean in years, like probably 7 or 8 years. And because I've kind of adopted this approach to get their calories higher and have more of a, like a bank to pull from, right? Like an amount to pull from, and be able to drop their calories more than add cardio. So if I do drop a guy, say he's not dropping, he's stalled, I drop him 15 carbs, for example, or maybe it's 20. It just depends on how big the guy is, right? If he's a smaller guy, but just giving that as an example, I might drop 20 carbs. I might add 5 minutes of steady state cardio or 1 or 2 hit intervals. I might take them from 5 intervals to 7. And I don't do that a lot. A lot of the times I'll just drop the calories, and every few stalls I'll add some cardio. And my whole thought process with that was I want to give a natural athlete less to recover from, especially with the steady state cardio, because back whenever I did it and you and I prepped together, Jason, like we were 2 hours of fucking cardio a day. That's what we knew. That's what we learned. And man, I just remember feeling like how much that zapped me. But at the time I'm like, fuck it, man, this is what we got to do. And it worked, by the way. But over time, I kind of changed my thinking with that. And I noticed a lot of the people that I started to prep in 2011, 2012, guys like Matt Holcomb, their stage weight would be higher from one season to the next when I didn't have them doing a lot of cardio, specifically steady state. So I just kind of adopted that. And I just have to have a talk with clients now. I'm like, listen, you get more time at home, you get more time to food prep, you get more time to chill out and relax by not having to be in the gym for an hour or 2 hours a day. But we're going to drop your food. And a lot of the food drops to me, I just explained to my client that it's mental. I'm like, if you have this bowl of rice and you take out 15 carbs from it, and I didn't tell you, you would have no idea that there's 15 carbs gone. You see the number, you know it in your head. You're not going to notice a difference. So a lot of the times it's mental, but I like to use more food drops if I can. Now, I do have people that are super, super stubborn that I had to get up to an hour and 15 minutes this last year, usually like women figure pros or women bodybuilders, that I just had to get them there because they had a dieting history. I've noticed people with a longer dieting history, natural, I have to push them harder every single time I diet if they haven't had sufficient time off. So that's just kind of my take on I don't think it's right or wrong. It's just kind of what I've seen work well in my clients.
Yeah. Yeah. I just know from, I guess, we can only pull from ourselves first and foremost, and then from our clients. I just know that the training is so important that the intensity stays high, that there is a response, that there is a pump. So I always just err on the side of, you know what, you can get up and fucking walk a little bit more, a few fucking steps. I'm going to keep that food as high as I can. And so it's always turned out better for me personally from a stage look when I do that. So that's kind of where I come from. It doesn't matter whether someone's really natural or not. For me, I'm going to try to preserve the training. So
yeah, and I like that. I think you said on the last episode, training should always be preserved. Like that's your gold standard. That's your number one. This is bodybuilding. Yeah. That's your number one. So the other cool thing about this episode is, we might have different opinions and views on stuff. We don't care.
100%.
We want to throw this out to the listeners because, guys, we want you to take this information and apply it to yourself, or if you're a coach, apply it to your clients. Tweak it. Like, see, that's how Jason and I have done all of our shit. Like, we've tried all kinds of different ways, and this is kind of where we settled on. And I wouldn't be surprised if we're doing an episode 5 years from now, we go and we're a little bit different. You know what I mean? Like, we've changed it up. So moving on to the next topic, man. So this is one I think a lot of people don't realize. Let's talk about low fat approaches in preps. I don't really want to talk about keto because we're going to save that for an episode. But I do want to talk about natural versus enhanced preps and when to use a low fat approach, because I see a lot of people in the natural bodybuilding world. It is more, prevalent, probably 2012 and earlier. I see a lot of coaches like getting fat super low, 30 grams on natural athletes. And I didn't think much of it back then because I didn't really know back in 2011, 2012. But these days I pay real close attention to stuff like that. Jason, when do you feel good taking someone low fat? And I'm not talking about low fat for a couple weeks. Mm-hmm. I'm talking about low fat in general, like in natural versus enhanced clients, because fat is very, very important for a natural athlete or someone's enhanced. I'll just go ahead and let you kind of kick that off and talk about it.
Yeah. So as far as the enhanced side goes, like I think to give the best answer, I need to remind everyone that, if you're looking at like a hormone chart, it's like a kind of like a ladder. And at the very, very top is cholesterol, very top. So, if you've just got low total overall cholesterol from eating a very low fat diet, you have less Legos or building blocks or Lincoln logs or whatever you want to call them to build the hormones as it progresses on down. But if you're enhanced and you're taking exogenous hormones, well, you don't really need that production to hit. So you have more leeway what you can do with your diet. I'm on HRT. I eat a low-fat diet. And when I want to shred up, like summer gets closer or when I was starting my prep, I pull my fats almost down to trace. I feel fine on it because I'm not really a fat processor anyway. As soon as I start eating high fat, the back of my head will break out. Like my arms get like these little red bumps. I don't know if I'll call them zits, but you can just tell like the pores are clogged. I just don't do well on high fat really. So I've found that I can just go ahead and take it down real low. Maybe I'll leave in like 8 grams of essential fatty acids and then everything else is trace. I'll get fucking shredded on that quick, like real quick. But I have that safety blanket. So I'll stop there for a second because I know you want to represent the natural side, and I'll let you kind of address further from there what you do. But if you have exogenous hormones in, you can take the fats lower from day one, and it's not really going to play an impact on the hormone profile.
I do want to say one more thing about HRT specifically, because now I've been on HRT since, I don't know, I think it was fucking August. And my cholesterol, man, I had to get my cholesterol down. So it was kind of a blessing in disguise that I was able to start HRT because my testosterone was so low, but I had to go low fat to actually get my cholesterol down because everything I did with higher fat.
So do I. Yep.
Yeah. So like it was perfect. And I can tell you guys right now, Jason, I bet our diets are probably pretty damn close. I'll take fish oil every day. I'll have just a tad bit of peanut butter. Everything else is trace. And I'm probably getting in 30 grams of fat a day. Yep. And I've got higher protein and my carbs are probably about 150. I'm taking in like 2,000 calories. I don't need a lot. I sit all day and I train for 45 minutes. So I'm getting leaner. I'm down to 210, but I feel great. Anytime I've ever gone that low on fat, whenever I've, obviously natural before that, dude, I feel like straight garbage.
Oh, yeah, because your hormones start to drop.
Yeah, so that's the point that I want to make for the natural folks. So with my natural athletes, I try never to take them below 50 grams of fat during a prep. Usually I try and start them off on 60. For most people, I'm going to get their carbs as high as I can to start their prep. And I'm gonna have their fat somewhere in the 50 to 60 range. And I don't really drop those unless I just have to for a very short period of time. Their carbs are already low. If I've got a female eating 60 grams of fat, I'm gonna drop her down. Like I'm gonna start to whittle that away. And there for a few weeks, I might get her down to 30 grams of fat a day, but it's only for a very short period of time. I'm never gonna leave her down there. I would rather take a natural athlete. If it's going to be for a longer period, like 8 or 10 weeks, and I'm just running out of room because they didn't have calories super high to start, and I didn't do their off season. If I don't have a lot of room, I'm not going to keep them real low fat. I would rather have someone on a higher fat, lower carb approach or a keto type approach just to help support their hormones. But like I said, that's a whole other podcast in and of itself. I just want our folks that are natural or coaches that work with natural athletes, you've got to be careful on how long you take someone low fat. Back in the day, I used to try and skyrocket my females' carbs so they could eat more carbs during the prep because that's what they wanted. So I'd have them eating 30 grams of fat a day. And that's just murder on a female. Like you shouldn't do that for a long extended period.
Not for a long time. No, like I wouldn't have it in an off season or something like that.
Right.
But for prep, I'm a little more, with my naturals, I guess I'm a little more aggressive. I think a small woman who's 130 pounds, I think 30 grams of fat is fine for hormone output. I think size has to do with part of it. I agree a man who's 180 pounds is going to need more, but I have no problem for 8 weeks having a woman on 30 grams of fat if that's what it's going to take. But at the same time, I've gone out of my way to learn how to fix people. So as soon as the diet's over, I'm fixing their hormones. So, you know, part of this, you got to do what you got to do to get in shape. And if someone's not a fat processor, 60 grams of fat is going to struggle and their carbs are going to get really low. And again, I like volumization to the muscle. So I'm going to just go ahead and probably go lower fat. And then I'm going to fix them afterwards. But I don't think 30 for a female who's 130 pounds is really going that low because that's still going to be 20% of cal intake. And I think it's plenty. I think it's more about the percentage than the actual number personally. So I am a little more aggressive there, but I totally agree. You don't want someone on trace fats for, 8 weeks as a natural. I mean, their hormones are going to completely drop out.
Yeah, that's generally when you see a lot of females reporting, hair loss and stuff like that. Yeah. Obviously dieting's hard enough on your hormones when you keep fat super, super low. God, I've heard horror stories of the fish and
Yeah.
asparagus diet, and like
Right.
literally they're taking in like 6 grams of fat a day
Right.
from fucking
Yeah.
fish.
Nightmare. Yeah. It's a
Right.
nightmare for how long? Yeah. 100%. But I'm just a little more aggressive on it, and that's just, that's just me.
No, and that's good, because here's the thing: you are a little bit more of an aggressive coach than I am. Sometime I've got more time to work with somebody, so I've got more of a cushion there. It really, there's no right or wrong. It really just depends on what you need to do to get people to stage, and that's
Correct.
why I want our listeners to really kind of understand. This whole episode kind of sets them up to think about their own preps if they're not going to use a coach.
100% it does.
Let's move on to the next part. Cortisol. Let's talk about cortisol and natural versus enhanced athletes. So guys, if you haven't listened to episode 2, we did a deep dive on cortisol. Obviously you don't want to go back and listen to that now, but if some of this stuff we talk about, you're like, oh man, I want to hear more about that, go back and listen to that episode. It was really, really good. Man, cortisol and natural versus enhanced athletes. Like you said earlier, Jason, when you're taking testosterone, whether it's HRT or you're running your own cycle on the enhanced side, cortisol is not that big of an issue as it is for natural athletes, man.
Right. Right. I mean, when you're on a good cycle, I mean, you can sleep like shit and you'll still make progress. I mean, you can fucking, train 7 days a week and you're going to recover. I mean, it's a different ball game. But, just so our listeners understand, as cortisol rises and it stays chronically elevated, testosterone does go the opposite direction. It drops. As testosterone comes back up, either because of its exogenous or you're post-prep and you're doing the right things, cortisol gets pushed down. So they're at an inverse relationship. And it kind of makes sense, right? Like testosterone's anabolic, cortisol is catabolic. So there's a lot more things you can do to push the body when someone's enhanced as opposed to not. And that's why you see yourself taking longer to prep people so that you can control those stress responses and different things like that, because you don't have the safety blanket.
I think that's also important too when people are searching for a coach or just getting advice from people. If you're natural, you need to be real careful not to go out and use a coach that predominantly works with enhanced athletes, because a lot of the time they don't understand the differences in everything that Jason just said. The differences in cortisol are huge. And it's the same. By the way, it goes the same way. If you go out and get one of the best natural bodybuilding coaches on the planet and you're enhanced and they have no fucking idea what your body is capable of, you really need to do your research, guys. And I see that a lot. So with cortisol, you talk a lot about metabolic resistance. I talk a lot about stalls and cortisol and its relation to insulin sensitivity and stuff like that. Man, we just see it wreaking havoc on natural competitors more. I think they stall out. Well, I know they do. They stall out more. They have more issues with sleep. They have definitely, obviously, their thyroid down regulates, because when cortisol is super high, you secrete less thyroid hormone. Correct. I mean, it really is a major, major bitch. And that's kind of part of what you have to deal with. So that's why we've got all these different methods that we talk about in episode 2 to help minimize cortisol. You'll never be able to get rid of it. I think they had a product back in the 80s or 90s that blocked cortisol completely. And when people took it, they never lost any fucking fat. And they were perplexed, and they didn't realize cortisol is not an evil thing, but it is one of those things natural athletes need to be prepared for. I don't think we need to spend a ton of time on that. I think if people go back and listen to episode 2, it'll start to make sense.
Right.
All right, man. Let's jump in and let's talk about some of the iffy stuff that a lot of people don't talk about. Okay. When it comes to fat burners over the counter. Yeah. But let's talk about the thing that a lot of people don't realize, and let's talk about things like T3, clenbuterol, ephedrine, stuff like that. Obviously, our podcast isn't here to teach you guys how to use that stuff. Like, go out and do your own fucking research, or get a coach that knows what they're doing. And we're not saying that we recommend that for everybody, but we've got to talk about it. It's part of the sport. Let's start off with over-the-counter fat burners. I think one of the best ones that people need to kind of open their eyes to is the injectable L-carnitine. Yep. At 600 mgs a day. We talk about that. I think it's back in episode 1. Really, really good product. When it comes to over-the-counter fat burners.
Yep.
What are some of your go-tos? And I think there might be supplements that aren't quote unquote fat burners that help with fat loss that we can talk about. But Jason, when it comes to over the counter, I mean, you own a supplement company, but you don't sit there and push quote unquote fat burners. Talk a little bit about that.
Okay. So when it comes to over the counter fat burners, in my experience, a lot of the products out there by other companies that are just called like fat burners, a lot of them, help with hunger, which, hey, that's great. A lot of them overstimulate you, which I don't ever want. So they're helping with hunger. They're speeding up, certain processes that maybe you're getting a tiny bit of fat burn. Like, caffeine is, helps supposedly, liberate fatty acids. So, you have things in these products like synephrine and caffeine and all these different things where it really just seems like it's hyping you up. So I've never really been a big fan of like the quote unquote over the counter fat burner. But what I do use with clients, you've already touched on the one, is the injectable L-carnitine. It works amazing for natural or enhanced. And we've gone into why it works even better for enhanced. We've got yohimbine hydrochloric, and this has to be yohimbine or yohimbine, however you want to say it, hydrochloric. Yohimbe, which you're going to see in the fat burners that we just said, is a stimulant and it will help hunger, but it is not the same as yohimbine hydrochloric, which helps turn off the alpha-2 receptors in the fat cells, in a lot of stubborn fat, dark brown fat, and great product. So I'll use that in the morning fasted. I try to get the biggest dose in the morning when insulin's low, because that's what yohimbine works best when insulin's low. And then I also always put people on my ThyroBoost. It works. Like, it's an amazing product. I take it year round. My TSH was always kind of high. And it's kept me leaner. There's no doubt about it. So I'll use 1 or 2 ThyroBoost for someone. And a lot of times I've seen labs. Like, I'm a coach that, like, when most people come to me, if they've got any issues going on, I'm like, yeah, I want to see your labs. And if you don't want to get labs, then go work with someone else. Like, I'm to the point now where, like, I have enough inquiries and enough clients that if you don't want to work with me because you're too lazy to get like your labs, I don't really need to work with you. So usually I have an idea what's going on with their thyroid and different things like that. And then of course I'm going to put people on cortis. I'm going to keep that cortisol low. I'm going to at least keep it metabolizing. And that's what our product does. It doesn't let it build up. And that's what happens when it's not released. And, your people are just perpetually stressed. Our body was never designed that way. And so the cortis will help get that out. So those are my main 3 or 4 over the counter. Now, if someone wants to get a little more aggressive and they're not doing a tested show, you can use ephedrine. And the way you can get that is you can go to Walgreens. You got to go to the counter. What was that called? I'm blanking on the name of the product right now.
Yeah, I know.
But it had ephedrine sulfate in it, 25 mgs, which yields 20 mgs of ephedrine hydrochloric. And again, you can't use ephedra, which you will see in fat burning products. It must be ephedrine hydrochloric to work on the beta receptors of fat cells. So you can add that. I've never been a fan of ephedrine. It affects the prostate, and it actually always did with mine. So you take a piss and you get like dribbling pee after, maybe a little burning. It's like you're perpetually in a fucking swimming pool all day, like shrinkage out the ass. Like, I just never liked it.
Jesus.
It's like,
God, I love you right now. Keep going.
But I mean, it is. It's just a nasty product. I just never loved it. But those are your over the counter ones, and then I gave you my main 4 that I use, and I've had really good success with natural athletes.
Yeah, that was Broncaid, by the way. It just
It was.
Yeah, it has like that. There's 400 milligrams of some other shit in there. It's for helping clear people's sinuses up and stuff like that. But I took that way back in the day. Whether someone wants to say natural or not, like that, I don't ever consider that. I didn't care. I did MPT shows, so
it's banned, but that doesn't mean you're not natural. I mean, fuck, it's just ephedrine. You can take it when you've got a fucking sinus infection.
Right. Back in like 2008, I wasn't even worried about it. 2009, but I felt like straight dog shit on it. I just felt fried. Back to the over-counter fat burners, the traditional ones we see. Man, I haven't recommended those to people in a long ass time. Because to me, stimulants, they cause so much fight or flight. What's the relationship to cortisol? Which when you're in that fight or flight zone, you secrete blood sugar, insulin goes
Yep.
up to drive it down. In some senses, I don't think fat burners, if you're already highly stressed, especially in a prep,
Oh
why the
yeah.
fuck would you overstim yourself? It actually doesn't become a fat burner. To me, it becomes a liability in some
If
cases.
taken over time, like you said, when someone's already in a chronic stress state and that cortisol's building up, 100%. 100%.
Right. And people don't really realize that. So I used to just not recommend them because I was like, guys, just save your fucking money. Like
Yep.
they don't really work. Not like you think. It's a tiny, tiny percentage if they do. And if you're already fried, it may actually make your fat loss harder. I think that's my opinion. And I've been with multiple a couple of different supplement companies, and I just never recommended them. I just didn't care.
Right.
Let's talk about for assisted athletes. This is another reason why I think preps can be shorter. Well, I know they can. They can be shorter.
Yep.
There are things like T3, T4, clenbuterol, obviously, which in my opinion is a very, very dangerous thing if people don't understand not only how it works, but their own health, their age, the risks, on your heart and things like that, which we can, talk about a little bit if you want to. But
Yes.
to me, it's another cushion. It allows for a hell of a lot easier fat loss. You can run your thyroid, obviously, if you want to run it that way. You can use clenbuterol, which is, I used to laugh and call it cardio in a fucking pill. Like, why do cardio when you can take clen? I'm not saying that's what I recommend, but kind of talk about the differences in enhanced versus natural preps when it comes to being able to utilize that stuff.
Sure. So, clenbuterol is ephedrine's more effective and less side effect cousin, in my opinion.
It just fits the receptor better. Is that right?
Yes, but what it doesn't do is, so ephedrine basically attacks pretty much all the receptors in the body. That's why it hits prostate. That's why, all these different side effects. Whereas clenbuterol really only attaches to the fat receptor. So you're not getting all those side effects. Now, the side effect you will get is you will be jittery from it, and you're going to get a lot of energy. But some people cannot stand the jitters. I never really got the jitters. It just gave me really nice, steady energy. And like you said, it's like you almost want to do your cardio. Like you just have more energy. Your VO2 max goes up, so you're more efficient at doing your cardio. And this one, again, turns off the beta receptors and inside the fat cell, and that allows fat to be liberated better. Fat cells have alpha receptors and beta, and then clen turns those off, and yohimbine turns off the alpha. But clen, there have been the reason it's not legal in the United States, at least one of the reasons I've heard, is because it's not in and out of the body like ephedrine. Ephedrine is in and out super fast. That's why that Harvard study came up with the ECA stack back in the day, ephedrine, caffeine, aspirin. The caffeine and aspirin slowed down ephedrine and made it stay in the body longer. That's all it was doing. Clen stays around longer. So you're getting better fat loss and you don't have all the side effects. Now, in large doses, there have been studies that show that it can weaken like heart valves and do different stuff like that. Those were on massive doses. Even more massive, like 100 mics a day. They were high doses given to rats. But the literature is still there. So, if someone has any issue with their heart, I would never say get on clenbuterol. If you're a healthy person, running 20 to 40 mics a day, maybe the last 8 weeks, it's not really going to hurt you. But here's what you got to worry about. You got to worry about adrenal shutdown and then adrenal fatigue afterwards. You will feel it. I have sometimes just reversed people off of it. It sucks to stay on it a little longer, but then you kind of don't have that huge crash. It's just kind of pick your poison. If I do just take someone off of it at the end, then I'll just say, hey, you're going to have to rely on a little caffeine here for a minute. And then we'll get your adrenals going, give you some, something to get your adrenals going. We have a product with New Ethics and things like that. We call it Adrena Health. So, but you got to watch that. You got to watch the heart. People say that you become accustomed to clen or your body gets used to it. And, there's been all these theories about you can take Benadryl to reset it, or you could take this other allergy medicine. I forget what it's called now. That was supposedly reset the receptors. And, you got people who do like 2 weeks on, they work up to like 150 mics and then they take 2 weeks off. Honestly, I don't believe your body stops getting the nervous shakes and you don't feel the energy. And that's more because of what happens with the adrenals down regulating. So the body always wants to turn to homeostasis, but I can't find anything where it says the receptors stop being turned off. So my point is, I don't think you have to titrate up as high as some people do on Clen. When I would use it, I would wait till I was later in prep and maybe go up to 40 mics. I'd do like 20 in the morning and 20 pre-workout, and that'd be about it. But again, if someone isn't as lean, they need to start it maybe sooner. But Clen, lastly, is anti-catabolic. So it's not anabolic, but it's anti-catabolic. So I've seen people just use Clen, and it helps them get to the stage 3, 4, 5 pounds heavier and in better shape just from Clen. So people used to think it was anabolic or you're adding muscle. No, it's just highly anti-catabolic. So that's my spiel on Clen.
Yeah, there's also we don't have to go into the deep dive on T3 and T4, but obviously if someone wants to support their thyroid and keep it from slowing down, that's another tool in the toolbox that enhanced athletes can grab that's going to definitely be different for natural athletes.
Oh yeah. I mean, you won't have to, you could not refeed and eat, protein and veggies for 12 weeks and you'd be miserable, but you're going to keep dropping weight because you're not down regulating the thyroid. It's not being affected by the cortisol loop or, just metabolic adaptations in general. I'm personally, as a coach, not a huge T3 fan. If someone comes to me already on it, I'm going to keep you on it because I'm not going to try to pull it out and fix things during a prep. But I've been able to get people off their thyroid meds and onto ThyroBoost and, with helping them deal with stress better, managing cortisol, managing blood sugars. A lot of times thyroid downregulation is more of a symptom than the underlying cause of everything. And so I usually can get people on ThyroBoost as I'm getting them off of their thyroid meds. And one of the problem with thyroid meds is they stop working after a while. Like if you watch people on them, they have to constantly go back to the doctor and get their labs. And a lot of times they have to get increased,
right?
And at some point that's just not healthy to keep increasing. And so, if I can, I try to get someone off of them. And I'm not a big fan in prep with T3. Like I don't just say, oh, it's time to prep, let's use T3. You know what I mean? Like there has to be like circumstances where maybe someone's like, they've already showed signs of slowed thyroid, ThyroBoost isn't really doing much for them. Prep's starting. They don't want to back out. Things like that. But I'm not one of those coaches that are like, oh, let's use T3. There's a lot of coaches, it's just part of their protocol. And it's because they don't want to have to make as many diet adjustments or they don't know how to fight all these other things. So they just throw it in.
Yeah. And I think that's, it's important that you said that. John Meadows said something at the Physique Summit back in, we were all there. I think it was back 2017. He said, what I like about our group of coaches that we have presenting, they aren't people that just throw drugs at a problem. They understand how to problem solve. So I see a lot of people immediately, dude, we've got coaches here that work with Gen Pop clients and their starting protocol involves fucking Clen. I'm like, you guys fucking suck. Like you have no idea how the body works, how fat loss works. So guys, if you're out there searching for a coach, be careful, like do your 100%. Research.
Like I said today in my IG post, I'm like, dude, there's levels to this shit. There really is. And like, if you're with a coach for 3 years and you're still trying to cut and your body ain't responding, and I had someone, inquire with me and not once did their coach say, we better look at labs. I'm like, I appreciate the loyalty, but man, like that person just doesn't know what's up. Like,
yeah, they don't. They're not at the next level. And you're right.
Not even levels.
Not even
the only people that are gonna be able to help is a 100% healthy person that comes to them. And unfortunately, most women, after they've been through a few preps, they don't fall under the 100% healthy anymore.
Right.
Yeah. Anyways, I digress.
Let's talk about muscle gain during prep. I don't think we need to talk on some of the dark stuff when it comes to fat burners. Some of the really dark stuff, I just don't think we have.
I'm not educating in DMP anyways.
No, I'm
never
not.
Used it, never touched it. I think anyone who will use it's a moron. So that's my spiel on it.
Yeah, I don't think we need to go there. Let's talk about muscle gain during prep and the reality with natural enhanced folks, because Here's the thing with whenever I prep a natural client, I like to get them ready early if possible, and I like to feed them into the show, lower cortisol. It leads to a more muscular appearing physique, but at no point during a prep is anyone going to gain muscle if you're natural, unless you're
Nope.
just a fucking brand new or a genetic freak. If you're a
Right.
newbie or genetic freak, in the very beginning, you might gain a little bit just because all of a sudden it's prep time and you're starting to train harder because you're
Right.
more motivated.
That would be why. Yep.
Right. And if that's the case, then you need to really take another look at your off season
Off
and
season. Yep.
prioritize
100%.
this. But natural athletes, you just aren't going to see it. Even whenever I get someone lean enough, I always tell them, listen, I'm going to bring you in a little bit bigger, a little bit fuller, because I'm going to feed you into the show. But that's not muscle gain that they're getting. It's mostly glycogen. It's a drop in cortisol, so their body looks better. They're able to fill out, look better. And anytime you can eat more food and keep the cell more volumized, you're going to pop and you're going to look
Yep.
better.
100%.
That's always the goal for my natural athletes. Always, always. But it's never muscle gain. But there's another side to this, which is a very fascinating side. I've worked with quite a few enhanced folks that I've helped along the way put on stage weight once they got 100% lean. And
Yep.
Jason, this is a very, very real thing for guys that can add muscle leading into their show or maybe halfway through prep. Talk about that a little bit.
Sure. So I find, this has just been my experience, guys who stay leaner, or a woman, but in general, men who start pretty damn lean for prep and then they finally hit the gear, they're going to grow. They might not even lose a pound really compared to their starting prep weight to their ending prep weight. I find guys who are on, but they get puffy in the off season. They really push food, maybe because they still needed muscle, or maybe because they just can't keep their hand out of the cookie jar. They might be adding muscle, but they're going to drop weight right away as you start prep. Like someone like myself who stays really close to stage weight, if I started a cycle like into a show, like I'm going to probably gain 5 to 8 pounds, to be honest with you. But I find people who don't stay very lean, it's definitely, they're probably gaining, but you just don't really see it and the scale starts dropping right away. So it does kind of matter who it is, but in general, bodies differ, genetics differ, but yes, prepping on gear, you can certainly add muscle into the show. And as a coach who's listening, you really have to watch all the biofeedback. Like and my point is, if you have a natural client, you better be seeing that 1.2 or that 1.5 or that 2 pounds, whatever you've set the goal, you better be seeing that pretty much on average every week. But with a natural or with an enhanced athlete, you might not see the scale drop for 5 weeks. So you better really be able to assess a physique and see where they're filling out more, their shoulders are capping more, and really know and be patient, because some coaches aren't good at being patient, that things are happening. It's just not the scale dropping. It's 2 different preps sometimes, prepping a natural and an enhanced, and you got to keep that in mind as a coach as you're moving forward.
That to me is whenever I've helped, I probably had 50-50 natural versus enhanced athletes back in, 2014 and prior. And man, when that stuff would hit, it was pictures every week. I'm like, listen, take fucking pictures every week, because your weight's not dropping. You actually might be gaining a little bit. You're perfect on the diet. I've got to see pictures in the exact same spot, same lighting, same clothes, same time of day. Don't do it with a pump one day and flat, the next morning straight out of bed. Like I had to use that, and that actually became my tool to get them to stage. And man, it was really hard, because you're right. You do have to be patient, and you have to help them be patient, by the way, because sometimes that shit's it's a mind fuck. So it's one of those things where, I think pictures are the biggest tools that will help an athlete or a coach out. And the other thing, man, and I've seen it with some of my athletes, like I've helped people gain 11 fucking pounds of stage weight over the course of 11 weeks. Once they were stage lean, it just becomes a completely different animal,
Well, that's what I was
especially if
telling you,
you're a
right? A guy
bodybuilder.
who starts leaner, you're able to feed them more, and they're definitely going to grow into a show,
Right. Yeah. So sometimes it may not be the healthiest approach, depending on how much shit you're going to use and how long you're going to be on something like trend, for example, which we don't have to go into all the details here, but there are protocols out there. And I see guys put on a shit ton of size. But man, you better be looking at your fucking labs and getting that shit done. I know so many people that do that, and they don't hardly look at anything. So
Yeah,
that's
it
dangerous.
still exists, as crazy it is with how easy it is to use private MD labs. But yes, it still exists.
Right. Let's talk about this. This is and then we'll kind of wrap up the show. This is something I want our listeners. I know we've been talking more of the enhanced crowd than we have anything else the last couple bullet points. But this one to me is probably the most important for natural folks. Let's talk about staying stage lean for numerous shows and for a longer a period of time and its role on hormones versus an enhanced athlete that, Jason, we see a lot of people in the IFBB or just the NBC in general that are assisted, they'll do, some of the pros will do the Arnold in fucking March, and then they'll still make it to the Olympia. And, there's a difference to where when you're natural, one of the biggest keys that I was preaching for, 5, 6, 7 years was like, guys, stop doing spring and fall shows. You're fucking getting lean for a spring show, and then you're gaining body fat over the summer, and then you're trying to diet for a fall show. And it was really starting to fuck them up. But not just then, there's been a lot of times I've seen people get lean in May for a natural pro show, or they try and win their pro card or whatever in May. And then they're trying to turn around and fucking hold that conditioning, and they're doing shows all the way in fucking November. And it's much, much different than an enhanced athlete. You're able to take your folks they're enhanced or on HRT or what have you, and you're able to keep them leaner longer, correct? And if so, go ahead and talk about that for a minute.
Yeah, 100% you are. And it goes back to some things as far as, you don't have to have fats as high. But, they're not going to feel so shitty. We know that when a natural athlete diets for a show, we know men's testosterones get down into the 90-year-old levels, 100, 85, these terrible testosterone levels. And so if you keep the body there and that lean, and we know that, you can even reverse a guy, but if you're keeping him lean, the testosterone is still not really going to come back, even if some calories have came up. And what's going to happen over the course of 8 months of doing that, you're going to get worse and worse. You're not going to get better and better. If you watch a lot of pros, as the preps unfold, they usually get better and better because they're just getting lean, a little bit leaner. They can open up their food more, and the hormones are supported. So it's a completely different ball game when you're natural and when you're enhanced, because the hormones are staying elevated with the enhanced guy. And as long as they're on their diet and doing the right shit, they're just going to keep getting better. But that doesn't work, for a natural athlete. Reversing is only going to preserve everything for so long if that body fat's staying low. And eventually that low testosterone is going to win out, and the body's going to look haggard, tired, and just lack of pop. And they might even see finally some body fat really starting to come back, and it gets harder and harder to maintain that conditioning because they're getting less and less efficient.
Yeah, it's those are things that I learned early on, mistakes I was making, and I was trying to keep my folks too lean after shows back in 2012, 2013, because I knew it was going to make it for an easier prep, when they prepped a year down the road, for example.
Right.
And I would notice when I would see blood work on guys, if they were only 7 pounds over stage and they were still really lean, they could be ready in a month to step back on stage. Man, their testosterone never came back up. And that's when I started to really learn about keeping someone too lean from reverse dieting. The other thing that I learned from is very rarely will you ever see me prep a natural athlete for that show in May, June, or July, and then have them push on all the way and do, the world championships are usually in the natural world in October and November. I used to do that. I used to diet people, start them in February, they'd be on stage in June, and then we would have to fight to hold that conditioning. Now they wouldn't be doing any cardio, they'd be just weight training, their calories would be up, and they'd be holding that body fat level. But it was the same thing as reverse dieting. Their hormones stayed in the shitter. Now, the last year or two, I've had some pretty damn good natural athletes that I just told them, I was like, listen, if you want to compete this long, you're going to have to take a whole fucking year off after this, like minimum. Like as soon as you're done with your shows in October, you need to get through the holidays, and then you need to take the whole next year off too. because you've stayed stage lean for fucking 5 months, and it's just so hard on your hormones. But the only time I would ever recommend that to someone is after having a talk with them. But they're also somebody that's going to make a pretty big impact. And I did have a few girls over the last 3 years that they've just fucking won all kinds of shit. Like, they've made money, but they knew they had to take the time off to kind of compensate. And it's the same thing with guys. I've got another guy that just got a hold of me today, really good men's physique guy. He was doing shows in June when he won his pro card and then pro debut, and then he was doing a show in October. And I just told him, I'm like, man, if you want to put on any real size, you're going to have to take up this whole year off, but you've also got to get your testosterone levels back up and let those balance out for a while. So it's one of those things I try and preach to natural folks all the time. It's not just about reverse dieting. It does have to do with body fat levels, and how long you stay that lean really dictates how hard your next fucking prep would be.
Right. 100%. I agree with you.
Yeah. And dude, it leads to, we go back to metabolic resistance. Like, we used to just think feeding people up was the thing, but it's a whole like, we just didn't know. I didn't know until, a few years ago. It's this whole cascade of things. Like, your prep and what that prep looks like is going to dictate how much time off you need. It's going to dictate how much time you need to fix and get your systems all back up and running. And then you also have to put in, how much do you need to improve? So one thing that we didn't touch on is when people are starting their preps now, guys, hopefully, and girls, hopefully you've had a long enough off season. Hopefully your systems are all up and running. Hopefully your labs look good. All these things need to be in place before you even start a diet. Listen, if you just got on stage in October and you're prepping right now and you're natural, you're making a fucking mistake. I'll just say that right now.
I had a few people hit me up and want to start, and I said, yeah, I'm not the coach for you. I was like, I know too much, so I can't do that to you. I was like, I'd love to help you and make sure that you're optimized and things are getting back. I was like, but I'm not putting you through that, No,
so, I mean, dude, it's our reputation on the line. And plus, here's the other thing. Every time I've taken a situation on like that, every fucking time, I've never been able to get them as lean as they should. They don't look like 100%. They should. And then it looks like we can't fucking do our job.
100%.
And then they're really fucked because they should have been recovering. So then after that, they really balloon up. So it's like, I don't want that. I don't want that for them. I don't want that for me. So guys, hopefully this has been a really informative episode, whether you're assisted or you're natural or you're just like me, you're on HRT and you want to maximize your physique. I think this has been a pretty good peel back the curtain into what preps look like as you guys diet and get ready to kick 2020's ass. Jason, is there anything else you think we missed out on or anything you want to say to the listeners before we get out of here?
I know this has been a long episode. The one thing I will say is that, there is a difference in training as well. You're going to be able, and I think that goes without saying probably, but just to throw it out there. I mean, you're going to be able to do more volume. You're going to be able to train more days in a row. You can probably even do 7 if needed, at least 6. With my natural athletes, rarely do I have them doing 6 in prep. Rarely. It's usually 5. And if I can control it well, I'll have them doing 4 coming into the prep. 6 though, I'm fine with enhanced. And if I need it, I'll go 7 with enhanced. So that is a difference as well. So keep that in mind, based on what side of the road you're on.
That is a good point. Most of my folks, I would say I average 5 days a week with them. I'll ramp it up to 6 at the end of the prep if I have to, or some people I will have on 6 if they've shown that they've made really good progress on that. But the only difference with me doing that is because I know their cardio is going to be low. I know their hit's going to be low. So to me, that's kind of the slow offset. But if I've got to get their cardio up really high, I'm not going to have them training 7 days a week if they're natural. So to me, there's a lot of give and take. I think that 5 is kind of that sweet spot where natural folks can train enough and get enough stimulation and protein synthesis and the muscle, but not overreach, because training, prep becomes one big fucking overreach when you're natural. Right. Like it really does. Like your CNS is just in the shitter at the end. So 7 days a week of training and fucking two a day cardios and all that stuff. Like you're just asking for cortisol through the roof, which, as I said, go back and listen to episode 2 to kind of learn more about that. So yeah, man, I'm glad you Glad you brought that up. I do want to ask our listeners one more time, guys, now that we're at the end of the episode, please hit pause. Go leave us a review. 5 stars would be great, but just be honest. Leave us a review. We've had nothing but 5 stars, so thank you very much for that. Type some words in there. Let us know what you think. And if you ever want to hit me up on Instagram at team_Gorman. Find Scooby. You can, all you gotta do is search Scooby Prep. Jason, I can't remember your IG, but I think if people just put in Scooby Prep,
they'll find it if they put in Scooby Prep, but it's Scooby Prep _IFBB Pro.
Yeah. Hit us up, guys. Let us know if there's people you want to hear on the show. We will have guests eventually. Let us know if there's topics. We're going to do more Q&As. And, dude, we'll see if we get some questions this week. We might do a Q&A follow-up to this episode.
Yep.
And then, dude, we just have so much stuff to cover, man. I'm super, super excited for this. But we're going to let you guys go. It has been a long episode. If you have questions, send them to our Instagram. We'll compile those and mostly send them to me. I'm the one compiling the questions, but hit us either one of us up, and we'll get this one up and running, and we'll be back for episode 9. So for myself and Jason, we're out of here. Thanks, guys.
See ya.